Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. Today's solo flight special is being captained by Wright. Ground traffic control has moved us to the departure lane, and we will be taking off shortly. Please return all seat backs to their original position, and ensure that all tray tables are stowed in the locked and upright position. Now fasten your seat belts. Kick back, relax, and enjoy the show as we soar above the friendly airwaves in comfort and style. Once again, we thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. This is your captain speaking, and I would like to take this opportunity to personally welcome you to this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. We know you have a choice when it comes to your radio listening pleasure, and would like to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. What's more, we are confident that no other radio program or venue will fly you over the friendly airwaves in as much comfort and style, nor leave you with an indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment, quite like we can here at the Wright Flyer. Now that you're aboard, please be seated, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show. We've taxied to the departure lane and are awaiting takeoff clearance from air traffic control. While they go through that mindless, bureaucratic red tape and regimentation, I'm going to go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist because there is a lot of news and information to get to before I may indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, it has happened again. Apparently, there has been another mass shooting in San Bernardino, California. However, details at this moment are sparse in coming out. However, the San Bernardino County Sheriff has come out and stated that there are expected to be at least 1 to 3 shooters, and that they were identified as white males dressed in tactical gear and ski masks. Now, folks, I have to say that I am not a conspiracy theorist. However, there is too much with respect to coincidence with this occurring not even a full week after the Planned Parenthood shooting occurred in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So what we're seeing here is yet another pattern of social deviance moving out to abuse their fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms. And of course, we know what the mainstream media, as well as the political powers that be's response will be with respect to this issue. As always, they're going to come out and blame our fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms for the carnage. Now, apparently, at least 12 people have been killed, and there are 20 that are considered to be injured. What's just maddening about all of this is how it happens so quickly, and that it seems to be part of a well-devised and orchestrated plan to completely make our fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms look bad. But the fact of the matter is, when you stop and consider the reason why the founding fathers had included the Second Amendment in the Bill of Rights, it was so that the citizens could keep a safe and free society. And the only way that we're going to be able to do that is to acknowledge the fact that the Constitution requires us to be self-accountable for our own security. Remember what Benjamin Franklin had said, and that was, and I'm going to paraphrase here, that those who give up liberty for a false sense of security deserve neither liberty nor security, and shall surely have none. That is the message that the mainstream media and the political powers that be don't want you to think about. They don't want you to remember that you have to be proactive in maintaining and safeguarding your fundamental and unalienable rights. Now, of course, my heart goes out to the victims of this senseless criminal action. But that said, we should not be generalizing gun owners in the United States and saying that they are all like these deviants who go out and perpetrate such heinous and horrible deeds. But You're not going to see that from the mainstream media, and you're certainly not going to see it from the Obama regime, because they want to push forward their radical and extremist left-wing agenda, irrespective of the cost that it will have on the American people. And of course, that once again besmirches and ignores the idea that the absolute wielders of sovereignty and power in the United States is we the people. That is the way that our founding fathers originally intended it when they devised this country and the United States Constitution over 2 centuries ago. Again, Obama will probably go in front of the cameras of the salivating mainstream media, huff and puff in anger with a false sense of outrage, and blame this on quote unquote readily accessible military-style weapons. I hate that phrase, and I hate that that is what he always goes to, but it's right out of the propagandistic playbook of Joseph Goebbels. That is what we see with this regime time and again. It has been their modus operandi ever since they seized the reins of power back in January of 2009. Folks, we have to be reticent and willing to stand up to these nefarious governmental actors who will use these tragedies as an opportunity to attempt to strip each and every one of us of our fundamental and unalienable rights. It is absolutely horrendous that this has happened, but there is a kind of change in the political powers that be's attitude towards how to handle these active shooter situations. I want to roll the clock back to the 1960s. We're on the campus of the University of Texas, and Charles Whitman is in the clock tower, which is at the heart of campus. He's suffering from a brain tumor, and this has driven him to the point to start shooting at innocent men and women on campus. The attitude that was taken by the authorities at that time was to deputize the average citizens around, allowing them to get their own firearms and to help apprehend and subdue the shooter before he could spread any more rampant carnage and chaos. And in fact, it was actually a private citizen using his own firearm that brought an end to Whitman's reign of terror. Now, in Whitman's case, it is easy to explain why he was acting the way he did. He was suffering from a brain tumor. It obviously and clearly interfered with his mental faculties. We don't know in this case what it is yet, although the mainstream media has rushed out and claimed that it was 3 white individuals dressed in tactical gear and concealing their face with ski masks. Whether that is true or not has yet to be seen, but I have trouble believing it. What this seems to really remind me of, because there have been reports of these 3 deviants leaving a suspicious package behind at the scene of the crime, is the type of terrorist attack that we saw in Paris, France. In fact, it would not surprise me if Islamo-fascist terrorism was actually behind this. And that's the other thing that the mainstream media and this political regime of the Obama camp don't realize, is that you don't have to be Middle Eastern to be a Muslim. Remember the Tsarnaev brothers, you know, the Chechnyan Mario brothers? They had white-appearing skin and features. Islam is a religion, and the Islamo-fascists are following a twisted medieval ideology based on Islam. There is no escaping that, and that is actually the greatest threat that's here. But maybe this is some copycat thing with respect to the Planned Parenthood shooter. However, in that case, we know from some of the reports that there was a bank nearby the clinic, and he went in for a 5-hour standoff with law enforcement officers and actually did not hurt or shoot any of the Planned Parenthood staff. So again, that idea of the unconfirmed and uncorroborated report from a law enforcement officer in the case speaking on the condition of anonymity because he or she did not have permission to actually speak about the incident makes me wonder about the veracity of the claims made. Again, the media has jumped to conclusions, and I'm afraid that they're jumping to conclusions in this case as well. And therefore, it is so important that we not buy into the media spin until all of the facts become readily apparent and available. That is what it means to be truly objective. And unfortunately, with respect to the way the mainstream media has been handling these issues as of late, they have not been forthright with the American people. They have been jumping to conclusions without actually taking all of the facts into consideration. And they don't all of the facts into consideration because that would go against their radical and extremist left-wing ideology. Remember, they are wholeheartedly committed to this agenda of theirs, and they don't care what the truth is. In fact, if the truth hurts their agenda, they are going to do everything in their power to bury it. You can rest assured that that is exactly how the mainstream media and the political elitist powers that be will handle this case. But that is not the way that these cases should be handled. Again, the American people know the truth as to what's actually happening with respect to this, and we're just not getting it. You know, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to try and come out and blame an inanimate object for what has happened here. This is clearly the actions of an insane few that have gone out of their way to attack the people. And remember, as Jeremy and I have frequently reiterated on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, our fundamental and unalienable rights end where someone else's begins. So when these people carry it out, this is not the actions of your average gun-owning citizen. Rather, this is the action of a truly sociopathic and criminal mind. We seem to forget that, and part of that comes in through this politically correct notion that society made people do things. No longer do we hold people accountable for their own actions. We attempt to do guilt by association and to blame people for everyone within that group. And this is the type of identity politics that is so dangerous. It represents the kind of balkanization that the United States has recently fallen victim to. Because when you look at the way that identity politics are playing out in the political arena of modern politics, you find a disturbing trend. And that trend is that the mainstream media and the political elitists or the detente wing of the gutless opposition party will all play into the insane machinations of these individuals and attempt to carte blanche blame it on an entire group. Take, for instance, the Southern Cross battle flag. Remember all of the hoopla that happened with respect to that after Dylan Storm Roof shot up the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church there in Charleston, South Carolina back in June? That ties in directly into this media story, this agenda, and the gutless opposition party, or GOP, fell lockstep into the media story. They allowed the media to move forth with their radical and extremist agenda. And for what? What did it accomplish? Nothing. It absolutely accomplished nothing other than to try and strip decent law-abiding citizens of their ability to engage in free speech. And the way that we've seen that is basically throughout this entire school year, we have seen all of these school districts expelling students for displaying the Southern Cross battle flag, either on their automobiles or on their clothing. We've seen them try and remove monuments that have been at courthouses and other places for generations. You remember how the media always tried to claim that the flag was flying over the State House grounds. No, it was flying over the memorial to fallen Confederate soldiers. So, in a way, that is an outdoor museum. So, the entire message that the mainstream media was peddling in the immediate aftermath of an undeniably horrific and tragic shooting was, you know, just a bunch of malarkey. And it was all to push this radical agenda to attack the cultural heritage of a particular geographical region in the United States. That is the kind of disingenuous thing that I've been trying to warn you about. And again, that also explains why it is so important that you gain a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and thereby your fundamental and unalienable rights. Because when you are armed with that knowledge, it empowers you to see what is actually happening and gives you the tools to stand up to these perpetrators, tyrants and despots who would do anything to strip you of your fundamental and unalienable rights, and tell them no. We will not rewrite our history. We will not bow or capitulate to this cancerous doctrine of political correctness. But you see that that's exactly what has happened with respect to these stories. And it's funny. When you see that they mention that they were 3 white men wearing tactical gear and ski masks, why is that brought in when it's not even corroborated? Maybe if they had brought that out as an official be on the lookout or bolo, okay, but that's not how it was done. It was just thrown out as this loose leaf reporting. Again, it seems to zero in on this radical, divisive agenda that the mainstream media is trying wholeheartedly to perpetrate against the decent average American citizen. These rash generalizations that occur with respect to these active shooter incidents are glaring in their hypocrisy when you compare it to how they try and sit there and say that not all Muslims are bad, that not all practitioners of Islam engage in terrorist activities. And, again, with the way that they've been handling Donald Trump's recollections of Muslim crowds cheering the collapse of the World Trade Center towers on 9/11 back in 2001, they're trying to say, look, it didn't happen. It just doesn't exist. But all gun owners, they are all crazy. They all have access to these arms and we can't trust them. Well, why is it that we can find these Syrian refugees, all of whom the Obama administration has brought in or is attempting to bring in this year, who are Sunnis, which is the same faction of Islam that ISIS is? Why are they more trustworthy than law-abiding American citizens? Why are there more strenuous background checks for lawful gun-owning American citizens than there are for the border crossings? Because we're allowing in all of these illegal aliens and we aren't doing any background checks on them. So again, it just doesn't make any sense, this line of thinking that is being perpetrated by the political powers that be and this radical and extremist left-wing media. The media is doing a grave disservice to the American people. They're letting down each and every one of us as they try to pursue this radical agenda of theirs, and they just can't seem to divorce themselves from it. But what they are engaging in is nothing short of hypocrisy, and it is sheer and unadulterated propaganda. Again, Jeremy and I have oftentimes mentioned this notion of repeating a lie often enough to try and make it be the truth, but it has to be quote-unquote boomerang proof. That is what Joseph Goebbels said with respect to the proper application of propaganda. Unfortunately for the mainstream media and the Obama regime and the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, we here at the Wright Flyer are trying to bring the truth. We are that boomerang that will show you the guiding light to empower yourself to see through this web of deceit and lies being woven by this mainstream media that is hell-bent on trying to paint gun owners as these radical extremists, when in fact the actual radicals and extremists who are a threat to us are those who would empower these Islamo-fascist terrorists to carry out the sorts of attacks that occurred in Paris, France, and what this attack may be. You see, I can also speculate in an idle fashion as to what these people are. Wearing tactical gear and body armor and leaving behind bombs, that sounds almost exactly like what happened in Paris when you had those people wearing suicide vests and going around shooting people. And that is the other aspect of it that they don't want to talk about. How do these gun-free zones, or stripping the citizen of their fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms, prevent these attacks? They don't. In fact, they exacerbate the problem. They make it far worse than it would be otherwise, and we have to be aware of this. And we must remain vigilant, because these nefarious political powers that be will stop at nothing to strip us of our fundamental and unalienable rights. This is the undeniable pattern that we see with respect to the Obama regime and the mainstream media whenever one of these stories comes to fruition. It is an undeniable fact, and we just have to find a way to respond to it. Well, the way to respond to it is to embrace the truth, is to look back at the natural law tenets that are contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. In so doing, we gain the insight that we need to realize that the message that is being propagated and pushed forward by not only the Obama regime, but the mainstream media just doesn't tie in with reality. Again, this is why I say that the cancerous doctrine of political correctness has been such a cancer and bane to the body politic of the United States of America. Because what they are doing is actively obfuscating the truth, trying to weaken the American people. And you can see this in the foreign and domestic policy of the Obama administration. Why, when all of a sudden the idea that the topic of main concern for the American voters is terrorism, do we all of a sudden see these incidents, which are just back to back and almost too coincidental and convenient to be true, to shift it back to the false narrative that these radical extremist left-wingers are trying to embrace? If you stop and think about it, it makes sense that somehow, somewhere, these people are being agitated by the radical and extreme left. Now, again, I know that that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it just seems a little off kilter that we're seeing these events occur so quickly. Now, American gun owners should not have to live in concern that every time one of these stupid and heartless events occurs, that all of a sudden the political powers that be are going to swoop down and attempt to take away their fundamental right to keep and bear firearms. And, you know, I always have to laugh when the left sits there and says that the right is overreacting when it comes to these sorts of issues, because what they attempt to say is, no, we're not out to get your guns. You can still hunt and do all of this. But if you look at what the message of nerdface Burn Me Sanders was, he wants to ban all semi-automatic firearms, irrespective of whether they are handguns or rifles. He just wants us to have single shot or bolt action rifles, or even lever actions. That's just insane. It's absolutely insane, because when you stop and think about it, the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution is quite clear when it says the right of the people to keep and bear firearms shall not be infringed. That is the absolute language of the Constitution. And as I have frequently reiterated on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, as per Article 6, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution, what is known as the Supremacy Clause, the United States Constitution itself is the supreme law of the land. Therefore, anything or any principle or objective or policy agenda that is contrary to the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution is illegitimate. It cannot be binding law. Because if it is contrary to the clear and concise language contained within the Constitution, then it is acting against the Constitution, and that is impermissible. Well, folks, apparently more news has come out about these shooters. Apparently, this was at a social services facility located within San Bernardino, California. Police said that up to now, 14 people have been killed at this facility. And this is just absolutely shocking. Reports are now saying that the shooting took place at the Inland Regional Center, which is apparently a nonprofit that works with individuals with developmental disabilities at 1365 South Waterman Avenue. What's more, this is a compound, basically, that's comprising of 3 buildings. So, and we have the fatalities that have occurred, which I think was 12 people. It's now at least up to 14 people that were injured, and we still don't know of any motive. Now, the police have once again said that the suspects are believed to have fled the scene. So now, California, in response to this, or at least the city of San Bernardino, in response to this, has shut down courts, schools, and other public facilities. And so they're now on a complete lockdown. Again, this does not sound like the activities of your average law-abiding, gun-owning American citizen. But the mainstream media will not report it that way. And this is just, again, so strange that it would be targeted this way. And now President Obama has already come out and said that we have a pattern of mass shootings that has no parallel anywhere else in the world. We have never, or we should never think that this is something that just happens in the ordinary course of events. Well, that's right, Obama. So how is it that they are doing this to fall directly into your radical and extremist left-wing agenda in an attempt to strip decent law-abiding citizens of their fundamental right to keep and bear firearms? That's the thing. He says this is a pattern, and he's attempting to politicize this event to gain political points, to once again push his radical agenda, which is an attempt to strip decent law-abiding American citizens of their fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms. This is an intolerable situation, and it shows that there just has to be something more behind this. Folks, I know that I must sound like a conspiracy, a conspiracy theorist nut here, but the fact of the matter is these events have happened in an increased fashion under Barack Hussein Obama's watch. And again, the government's first response is not to look at what the real cause of the problem is. It is to jump out and blame an inanimate object for it, which makes absolutely no sense to any sane and rational thinking people. But that's the thing about the radical and extremist left-wing agenda. It has nothing to do with logic. It has nothing to do with rationality. It has nothing to do with reality. It is all raw emotionalism hyped up to a sensational media that just runs out all of these stories with wide-eyed, wild speculation. And it is just shocking. So apparently, the first reports of the shooting occurred at about 10:59 a.m. at the regional, or the Inland Regional Center. Apparently, the gunfire had been targeted in a conference room which had been rented by an outside group. And she said that she was not aware of, she being Mary Beth Fields, who is the spokeswoman for the Inland Regional Center, said that she was not aware of which group it was, but another worker has told reporters that he believed that the group was a San Bernardino County public agency. Again, this smacks of Islamo-fascist terrorism. It fits the modus operandi of the people that wanted to spread the massive amounts of chaos that they did in Paris. It shows signs of being a well-orchestrated plot, which is something more than can be said for the other so-called mass shootings that have occurred over the summer. When you look at Dylan Roof, that didn't seem to be well orchestrated. When you look at Vester Flanagan and his shooting of his former colleagues at that Roanoke, Virginia television station on live television, that too, while premeditated, doesn't show a collaborative type of system that we're seeing, or a conspiracy like what we're seeing here, a true criminal conspiracy, if these reports about there being at least 3 gunmen are true. Apparently, the suspects have fled in a dark-colored SUV. The police say that there are believed to be multiple shooters, again, wearing military-style gear. And they apparently had fled in a black GMC Yukon northbound on Waterman Avenue. But again, we don't know anything more than that, other than the fact that the suspects are still at large, that they have engaged in this heinous and horrific act, and that President Obama has already come out and attempted to blame this on the ready access that we American citizens have to firearms. In other words, he is already gearing up to move against the Second Amendment with radical and unconstitutional executive orders and actions in a blatant attempt to infringe upon law-abiding American citizens' fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms, as is codified in the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. This is the shocking truth and reality that we are facing right now. And the pattern of it all just speaks to the type of weakness that we have seen as a result of these radical and extremist policies adopted by the left. This rhetoric that they have put out about how we have to be politically correct has just caused these people to go down this lane of sociopathic behavior. They have empowered them, and they are making greater attempts at dividing the American population as they once again move to seize upon the most important of our fundamental and unalienable rights. Because as Jeremy and I have reiterated on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, the fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms is the most important fundamental and unalienable right, because that is the right by which we protect all of our other rights. And remember that each right is coupled with a duty and responsibility. And that duty and responsibility with respect to the fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms is to proactively maintain and safeguard that right, but also to utilize it in a proper fashion. So obviously, these people are not acting within the same capacity as your average law-abiding American citizen. Yet, the president has already, in his statements to the mainstream media that is just salivating to push out his radical extremist left-wing agenda, is trying to connect this pattern in gross generalizations to all American gun owners. He wants the general public to think that all gun owners are sitting there hyperventilating at the opportunity to go out and commit mass atrocities like this. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. And that is the problem, folks. He is obfuscating the truth. He is trying to score political points off of this, politicizing this. And it reminds me of what he had said in the immediate aftermath of the Umpqua Community College shooting in Roseburg, Oregon, when he came out and said that we should politicize these events. Again, that is the type of opinion, position, and statement that empowers these people. It emboldens them because they realize that it will get them into the national spotlight as the media encourages this sort of behavior. That is the truth. That is the message that the mainstream media will not share with you. That is what the so-called experts on these matters won't address, and it only makes matters worse. We are facing a pattern that is being encouraged by the reckless attempts of the radical extremist left and the political powers that be in this country to demonize decent law-abiding citizens and thereby attempt to strip them of their best means of defending themselves against these sorts of people. And that brings me to the point of this happening in the state of California. This is a state with one of the toughest gun laws in the entire country. And yet we see that this event is happening there. It reminds me of that robbery suspect back in the 1990s who had run out in full body armor and had gone on a rampage. It was once again private citizens, being the gun store owners of the area, that provided the law enforcement officers with the rifles and rounds necessary to bring down the culprit, that brought a peaceful solution to a horrific nightmare. But again, you're not going to see this in the media. You're going to see the media continue to harp on this being ready access to so-called military-style weapons. And you can see that already with them saying that it's military tactical gear that they're wearing, instead of saying that they're wearing body armor and ski masks. Well, how is a ski mask really a tactical style garb? Because if you stop and think about it, the type of mask that is worn by the SWAT teams that have been moving methodically throughout the buildings in that inland regional center, clearing it, they wear an actual flame retardant style mask. Ski masks do not provide that. It is a way of attempting to hide their identity. Again, something that no rational thinking, law-abiding American gun owner would engage in. In fact, the vast majority of gun owners in the United States would not engage in such behavior as this. They would go out of their way to prevent it because they understand that their fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms ends when it encroaches upon another person's right to life. And that is the only time. So if you use the firearm to commit mayhem or murder, then you have lost your right, but it applies only to you if you were the one that carried it out. It should not apply to any other American citizen. And yet that is not what the message is coming from the White House. Again, Obama is acting in a way that is arbitrary and capricious and completely diametrically opposed to the fundamental natural law tenets that are contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. And there really is no way around that. It is the simple truth. It is an established pattern on his part. And we, the decent American citizen, are having to suffer through this thought of maybe he's going to come out and use executive orders to strip us of our fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms. And of course, the horrific problem about all of this, and the real concern that we have about it, is that the gutless opposition party has not yet once, one single time in the entire 7 years that he has held the reins of political power in the United States, stood up to him and said no. They are derelict in their duty of representing the people. They are bowing down at the altar of statism and giving this tyrannical wannabe potentate every demand and machination that he asks for. They are helping him achieve his radical utopian socialist agenda, and that is totally against the will of the people who put them there. In fact, it is a violation of the pledge and promises that they made in the midterm elections of 2014. Again, you're not going to see the mainstream media mention this. You're not going to see this be a part of their coverage. They are going to just try and sweep those facts under the rug because it is an inconvenient truth to steal a title from that man, Al Gore, who basically was facing a convenient lie with his hoax of global warming. So, that's the other thing, folks. How is Obama going to try and tie this into climate change? Maybe we could do it for him. We don't need to ban firearms because it's actually climate change that causes these sociopathic individuals to go out and do this. It's because it dries up water. And when there's less access to water and drought in California, that clearly makes people less stable. And therefore, it has nothing to do with the ready access to firearms, but the fact that there's not enough water. You see, this idle speculation and this radical agenda of the left can be twisted and contorted to fit any political agenda or message. And that is why they have attempted to change the name away from global warming to climate change in order to fit their radical and twisted agenda. They want to make it fit any scenario so that then they can push and say that the only way that we will be able to address this is to wholeheartedly embrace utopian socialist policies, which have a proven track record in history of failing wherever they have been tried. But again, these people are so arrogant. They are so determined and so self-centered that they think that the reason that socialism has failed wherever it has been tried is because the right people just haven't done it. And of course, what it really is nothing short of being tantamount to neo-feudalism. They want to be a ruling elite who strips the fundamental and unalienable rights of the citizens and reigns over them. They don't want the laws that they attempt to pass and force down the throats of the decent, average, hardworking American citizen to apply to themselves. So again, we see this separate coded system of law apply to them. We certainly see that Hillary Clinton believes this with respect to her email server scandal and with respect to her response after the Benghazi attacks. Maybe climate change caused that fake film controversy to come up. Maybe Susan Rice, when she was going out to all of those various Sunday talk shows, was just suffering from heat stroke from global flattening, and 48 penguins exploded, causing the Earth to deflate by 0.20 degrees. But you see how radically stupid that sounds, folks? It's because there is no real rationality behind these statements or behind these arguments. It's typical of whatever you hear from the radical and extremist fringe of the left, and we can see that they have taken over in the political arenas here in the United States. And once again, I have a feeling that this community center was probably a gun-free zone, because that is the one undeniable pattern that we see in most instances of these active shooter situations, because these social deviants that carry out these sorts of attacks are nothing short of cowards. So they're not going to go where the people could be armed and could actually stand up to them and prevent them from carrying out their twisted machinations. They're going to go to the path of least resistance. In that respect, they're like water. They always go to the path of least resistance. But again, the mainstream media certainly won't cover this. Obama won't mention that that is part of the pattern. He's just going to point to the so-called ready access that American citizens have to so-called military-style weapons. Again, this is the untrue propagandistic message that the mainstream media and the radical and extreme left are going to try and force upon us. It is intellectually disingenuous, it is totally dishonest, but it is what they are hell-bent on doing. And if we don't recognize this fact, then we may suffer the loss of our fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear arms. And again, I know that the cynical left-winger will try to obfuscate the truth and try to say that what I'm saying here is radical and has no connection in reality. But Bernie Sanders was the one that said that we shouldn't have semi-automatic firearms, and Obama is the one that is using this loose and vague term of military-style weapons. And again, if you look at the text contained within the Second Amendment, in clear and black and white, it says that the right of the people to keep and bear firearms shall not be infringed. It makes no mention of unless it's military-style weapons, or unless it's this, or unless it's that. No, there are no conditions within it. And as I have repeated numerous times, and Jeremy has repeated numerous times, and our first Air Marshal, Nelson Ward, has repeated numerous times on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, the United States Constitution, as per the Supremacy Clause found in Article 6, Clause 2, is the supreme law of the land. And I know that it sounds like that we repeat this maybe too much, but it is so important that it bears repeating as often as it does, because we have to respond to the lies that are being perpetrated by this radical mainstream media and this wannabe potentate who runs around and says that the United States of America is the only country on earth that has these mass shootings. Again, did he forget about what happened in Paris, France, just a little over 2 weeks ago? I mean, he was there for the climate change fiasco, but again, he tried to make this false narrative and tie it into this made-up hoax of man-made global warming. Again, he's trying to say that this is creating these terrorists. So heat causes Islamofascists to carry out their insane attacks, and guns cause Americans to run out and shoot people. You see how there is this really insane pattern in his logic there? And in fact, you can't even call it logic. That's an insult to any type of person who has any rationality. But that is the way that the radical and extreme left operates. You know, let's take it back to the Colorado Springs shooting that happened, where Robert Louis Deere was said to have been motivated by the rhetoric of the right wing with respect to Planned Parenthood's attempts to sell fetal body parts. Again, that is a disingenuous lie. But it fits the pattern of what the left has been doing with respect to these active shooter situations. They always go to blame some inanimate object or some abstract notion for causing it, instead of looking at what the real root of it is. And again, they're jumping to conclusions here without even having the full breadth of evidence in front of them. When you do that, that creates an open and obvious danger to jump to conclusions that are clearly erroneous. We can't jump to any conclusions until all the facts are available. And we certainly shouldn't be jumping to strip law-abiding citizens of their fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms if we haven't gotten down to the truth. But that is the truth. It is the truth that this radical extreme fringe of the left that controls the mainstream media, controls many of our institutions of learning from primary school all the way up to postgraduate studies, and certainly holds the White House right now. They don't care what the truth is. They will bend whatever story they can in whatever fashion. It's important that we get down to this because we need to rediscover the truth. And like Jeremy and I have oftentimes said on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, the most important service that we render to you, our cherished listening passengers and audience, is to provide you with the tools necessary for you to gain a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and thereby your fundamental and unalienable rights. And that is what we are dedicated to here on the Wright Flyer. And, you know, going back to the San Bernardino, California shooting, according to the Washington Post, the assistant director in charge of the FBI's Los Angeles office, David Bowdwich, has come out and said, we do not know if this is a terrorist incident. So, again, we don't know whether this is being carried out by Islamofascists who, like those who orchestrated those horrific attacks in Paris over 2 weeks ago, would carry out this kind of attack. It certainly fits their modus operandi again. But why doesn't Obama come out and speak to that? You know, that should be a clearly open and obvious message that he should be speaking to, because it is what has been happening throughout the world. We know that ISIS has been planning these sorts of attacks, and we know that ISIS has come out and said that they are already here in the United States, and in fact the FBI has corroborated that. Why isn't Obama saying that we need to, you know, really secure our borders, because allowing our borders to remain as open and porous as they are right now is just an open ticket for these radical Islamo-fascist terrorists to sneak through the porous border? No, you're not going to see that. You're not going to see that at all. But what you might see is Senator Marco Rubio of Florida come out and claim that this is because we aren't allowed to just, you know, warrantlessly go in and take out all of American citizens' cell phone data without going through the proper confines of a warrant as per the requirements of the Fourth Amendment. And you might see El Jefe Jebe Bush come out and say, well, see, the Fourth Amendment doesn't really apply to this. No one's rights are being infringed upon. And besides, if you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't be mad about this. Wrong. This hasn't prevented Islamo-fascists from attacking us in the past. It didn't prevent the Chechnyan Mario brothers, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev and his brother Tamerlane, from carrying out their attack in 2013. And it didn't actually stop the terrorists in Paris from carrying out their twisted attack. No, the law enforcement agencies are suffering from information overload as they encroach upon the Fourth Amendment right of the people. Again, what all of this goes to show is that if you really want to be effective against terrorism, and if you want to stop these violent acts and atrocities from unfurling here in the United States, we have to return to strict adherence at all levels of government to the fundamental tenets contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. Folks, there is no way around that. That is the ultimate truth that the mainstream media won't tell you, and certainly the Obama regime will not embrace, because they wholeheartedly believe, that it is important to strip the American people of their fundamental right to keep and bear firearms. And the reason that they keep pushing this agenda is because they want to fundamentally transform America. Folks, don't just take my word for it. Go back and hunt on YouTube for Obama's speech about this. In fact, I may even be able to bring it up. In fact, I'm going to do that right now.
We are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America.
You see, folks, you don't have to take it from me. It comes straight from his own mouth. He actually said that. And this is the type of fundamental and radical transformation of the United States that he's talking about. Stripping the decent, law-abiding American citizen of their fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms. We should not just bow down to the insane machinations of this radical and extreme left wing that has basically attempted a coup here in the United States. Our fundamental and unalienable rights, as had been concluded by George Mason when he had been drafted to help compose the Declaration of Rights for the state of Virginia, and later helped bring in the Bill of Rights to the United States Constitution, concluded that American citizens are endowed by their Creator with certain fundamental and unalienable rights. And all of the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution completely codified the most significant of those fundamental and unalienable rights. Our fundamental and unalienable rights are contained within the four corners of the Bill of Rights. And no government which is acting in a legitimate form or capacity has the rightful authority to strip, abridge, or encroach upon those fundamental and unalienable rights. Yeah, that's exactly what they're trying to do. Look, if Obama wants to strip away our fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms, then he needs to abide by the Constitution. Article 5 lays out the conditions that are necessary for amending the United States Constitution, and I don't think that the radical and extreme left has the wherewithal to actually push that through. And that is why they are wanting to turn to the illegal use, unconstitutional use of the executive order power in an attempt to abridge our fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms. They don't want it to go to a constitutional convention type scenario or have 2/3 of the states vote on it because they know they don't have the numbers to achieve that. They know that they do not have what it takes to win that. So they are going to do whatever is necessary to push through their radical and extremist agenda. And that's the danger with potentates like Obama. He doesn't want the facts to get into the way of his agenda, and he cannot divorce himself from his radical agenda. And so he will push harder and harder to once again strip the decent, hardworking American citizens of their fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms. And it's tragic. It's tragic to the victims because it's insulting to them. It's tragic to the country because it is transforming it in a way that the country was never meant to be transformed. Because if you stop and think about it for a moment, folks, the natural law tenets contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution are absolutely timeless. That means that they apply just as well today as they did over 230 years ago when our founding fathers engaged in the American War of Independence. And we can't just give up or give in, because if we do that, we are giving these people who want to develop a new age form of feudalism here in America to achieve their goals. And I just don't see that as being good for the country. I don't want to live in a country where we cannot be accountable for ourselves, where we are not allowed to think for ourselves. But that's exactly what these radical and extremist left-wingers want to do. They want to come in and tell us how to live our lives. They want to micromanage every facet of our daily lives, and they will stop at nothing until they get exactly what they want. And we should not allow that because it is not within our blood and DNA. You know, Barack Hussein Obama came out and said that racism is in the DNA of the country. He actually came out and said that, and therefore we should adopt more socialist policies, this so-called positive discrimination to redress the grievances of the past. But no, what's really in the DNA of the United States of America is liberty. And this notion that our natural law tenets of fundamental and unalienable rights cannot and will not be encroached upon by these radical and nefarious political left-wingers who are hell-bent on destroying everything that is good and decent about the United States. These are the people that come out and point the finger at the United States first. They blame the United States first. They take a look around the world and say, look, we should be more like these other nations, when in fact what makes us great is that we are not like any other nation. We are the last bastion of hope and liberty in the entire world, and Obama is working tirelessly to change that. Again, he said he wants to fundamentally transform the country. I played that clip, folks. That was his own words. That was his own ideology, his own twisted, radical machinations that are detrimental to the country at large and to the American people. And yet, we see that the gutless opposition party is not mounting any kind of resistance or defense to this. They are not stopping him. They are not being effective, and they are clearly not representing the very people that they claim to represent. And that is intolerable and unacceptable. And you know, when these radical extremist left-wingers want to sit there and say that they're not out to get your firearms, I think that we should let Bernie Sanders speak for them, because I think he does a good job of explaining what it is that he wants to do.
Well, I believe that we need to make sure that certain types of guns used to kill people exclusively, not for hunting, they should not be sold in the United States of America.
You see, he believes that certain types of firearms shouldn't even be sold in the United States. That is the insane machination of these radical and extremist left-wingers. And that is their true agenda here in the United States. And they are just going to utilize tragedies like this shooting in San Bernardino, California, to push forth this radical agenda. You know that Bernie Sanders is sitting there salivating at this opportunity. And he's going to point to this as proof positive that it is the requirement of the nation to strip the American people of their fundamental right to keep and bear firearms. But that's just not the truth. It's just like it's not the truth when he comes out and says that global warming causes terrorism. Folks, this is again why Jeremy and I so frequently reiterate here on the Wright Flyer that the most important service that we can render to you is to provide you the tools necessary for you to gain a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and thereby your fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms. Folks, what is unfolding in California is an undeniable tragedy. There is no doubt about it. But we should not allow these radical elements of the extreme left wing to come out and strip us of our fundamental and unalienable rights. And with that said, it is now time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. This is your captain, Randy Wright, thanking you for flying with us here again and inviting you to leave comments either on our YouTube page, our Google Plus page, or our Facebook page. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you again for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. See you next time.